First, I want to talk about choosing the right microphone for your vocalist. The vocalist could be you, it could be a bandmate that you've worked with for a while, or it can be a completely new client that you've never worked with before and maybe you've never even heard them sing before. When you work with instruments like a drum kit, a guitar amp, acoustic guitar, and bass, you kind of have an idea of what will work for these instruments already. An Audix D6 on the kick drum, an SM57 on the guitar amp, a stereo pair of condensers on acoustic guitar, etc. So you kind of know what to expect before going in, even if you've never heard the band play before. But with vocals, you really don't know what to expect unless you've worked with the singer before. The human voice just has so much intricacy and personal character to it, which is why the voice is really the most dynamic and varied instrument you'll ever record. So before you start recording, take some time, even if it's just an hour or so with the singer, and try out some different mics on their voice. Also, be prepared to accept the fact that your most expensive mic in your collection may not necessarily be the best sounding mic on a particular singer. Just close your eyes and listen for a bit, and don't let a price or brand name bias sway your choice. Go with what sounds best. Now, with that said, there are some basic starting points for different types of singers. For most singers, a good starting point, or control if you will, is to use a large diaphragm tube condenser mic. But even with tube condensers, there's a lot of different options for different voice types. My go-to tube condenser mics for vocals are the Neumann U47 and AKG C12. However, the Neumann U87 and U67 are also very popular as well. All of these mics are great starting points for recording vocals, but vintage and even newer versions of these mics can get pretty pricey. Fortunately, we live in a time where great reproductions or clones of these mics exist, sometimes at half the cost of the original or less. Here at the studio, we have a Flea 47, which is a high-end $5,000 clone of the original Neumann U47, a TNL A67, which is a high-end U67 clone, and a Peluso P12, which is a high-end C12 clone, and the Warm Audio WA87, which is a more budget-friendly $600 clone of the U87. In particular, the C12 or RP12 is a great starting option for female vocals. Now, when it comes to pop, hip-hop, and rap vocals, you might want something a bit brighter, more forward, and without the saturation and warmth of a tube mic. For this, you might want to try out a solid-state condenser mic like this AKG C414. I've got both the BULS and XL2 models here at the studio, and the XL2 is a bit brighter than the BULS model. We've got a Lawson L251 FET. This is a high-end clone of the Telefunken ELA M251E, which is another classic vintage tube mic. However, the Lawson L251 is a FET version. FET stands for Field Effect Transistor. This means that the tube amplification has been removed and swapped out for transistor-based amplification. Transistor-based amplification gives you a clearer, less saturated tone. I also have a Warm Audio WA47 Junior, which is a more budget-friendly FET version of the Neumann U47. For rock and more aggressive vocal types, a good option to try out is a dynamic mic, in particular the Shure SM7B or the Electro Voice RE20. Although these mics are intended more for voiceovers and broadcasting, they do a great job with more aggressive, more plosive vocals like hard rock, heavy metal, and anything that's much more guttural sounding. I also find dynamic mics can be helpful with really bright singers because the natural high-end roll-off that most dynamic mics have can help to tame some of the high-end in their voice. This is especially helpful when a tube condenser isn't available, or maybe a tube condenser is still too bright. However, with dynamic mics, you may find yourself doing more later on with EQ and compression during mixing. Regardless, dynamics can be an excellent budget-friendly option for recording vocals.